Welcome to episode 13. It's going to be another episode focusing on sales triggers. So hopefully you've caught the last couple. We covered, I think, expansion plans and funding rounds as well. So I think 10 maybe sort of sub-sales triggers within those two categories alone. Over an hour of footage or an hour of audio. So go and check those episodes out. But today we're going to be covering new offices. Within new offices, we're going to touch on, deep dive into 6 sub-sales triggers. Each of them gives you a slightly different indication of growth and therefore a different opportunity for reaching out. So I think we'll dive straight in, to be honest. But Biff, do you want to just give a top-level sort of overview of new office before we dive into the subcategories?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this will tie in really quite nicely with the last episode we did as well. So looking around that expansion, obviously in terms of expansion, people will look to open new centralized locations, obviously where they can house staff, they can set up operations, set up functions. So this will lead really nicely on from that, again, to help broaden different opportunities, different things to keep an eye on in terms of different sale opportunities that you can really reach out. I hope, some of you will have gained some different ideas from the last couple, but there's some really interesting or key areas within this episode now where, in terms of that continued growth, then these are absolutely fundamental things that will happen across organizations. So again, leading on from that expansion, this is probably more so the forefront before we really start to see some of that key expansion that we talked about in the last episode. But we'll get into the crux of it today, and again, hopefully giving you some other options and other indicators to track on a daily basis.
Brilliant. And I think just to say, obviously, there is quite a lot of crossover in some of these categories of sales triggers and subcategories, but I think the key difference is that if you really want to niche down on specific subsectors or verticals, that each of these sales triggers could give you a very slightly different, route into the business, foot into the door. So if you notice some crossover, don't worry. A lot of them do crossover. It's not that we're repeating ourselves. It's just that there's for some of those listening, obviously there's some very specialist sort of products and stuff out there. So stay tuned. But the first one we're going to talk or deep dive into is headquarters.
Yeah, so headquarters is, a fantastic sales trigger to track purely because this solely relates to obviously big expansion. So generally speaking, this will be more transatlantic or setting up in obviously another country. But what it will signify is that company has identified an area, country, region that they are going to put some core focus into. And it's a big indicator that there are big plans for further expansion beyond this, but ultimately as well that there's been a source of revenue that has been notified, identified, and ultimately they have seen some returns on that already. So actually what this then leads down into is a company setting up obviously a second headquarters, but essentially it's another core centralization of that business. So this will ultimately, they're going to be probably dealing within different currencies compared to other offices. They're going to be looking at other employment laws or different calibers of candidates, different divisions that they're setting up within this business. But as I said, it's already meant that there's been a key indicator of revenue and potential growth within that organization. So what this is going to require for that business is really setting up the foundations of almost a new business. And that's going to look from everything from the ground up. So even when you start to look around in terms of where that company is registered from a country's point of view, they're going to be operating across different laws, legislations when it comes down to even simple things such as, like, as I mentioned, like employee payroll, even employment law, different risk and regulatory things that they're going to have to abide to. So when they will start looking at this in terms of, okay, we're going to open a new office, perhaps, let's say if they're based in the UK, they're going to open an office in the US. This really is where they start to have to look at all the different indicators that are going to affect that business. So in terms of that, from a sales perspective, or opportunity for new contracts, or even expansion, there is a huge opportunity here where that client, it's not likely that they're going to just need one tool. They're going to be looking at an absolute multitude in terms of different sources, different tools, and again, different foundations that they're going to have to set up within that business, ultimately leading to multiple revenue opportunities in terms of selling in perhaps different solutions, different products right across the business.
Muted, it's classic. Compared with the other sort of subcategories that we're going to go into in this episode, I guess headquarters is probably one of the ones that's like a massive red flag of this company is growing substantially. And I guess setting up a new headquarters is probably going to be far more labor intensive than just opening a new office in a region you're already familiar with.
Yeah, this really, in terms of like new office and that expansion piece, this is like the holy grail. Because again, if you are a UK centric business and that organization's then setting up a new headquarters in the US, ultimately the tools that they're utilizing from a UK perspective might not actually be relevant or suitable for their US side of the business. So this is going to be a full review in terms of everything that they're currently using, but more importantly, what they're, in terms of actually looking at that bigger deal size. Let's say they've actually got a contact data provider that they're utilizing from a UK perspective. Is that tool still going to serve the same purpose over in the US? Probably not, in truth to be told. But what that may then lead to from a sales opportunity is your product able to provide something that covers both regions? So ultimately, where perhaps originally you were looking at a smaller deal size, now where we're looking at multiple locations or something company wide, that really helps expand that opportunity and ultimately the deal size that you're potentially looking at.
Okay, then. So in terms of these new headquarters, best place to track them? I'm guessing company websites, socials, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's probably a little difficult one. You could probably look in a couple of different places, really. If you have the ability, or different places where you can track where perhaps new entities are being set up through an organization. So it's probably quite difficult where it is in different regions, but things or announcements on the likes of Companies House, for example, that would be certainly one area where I'd look to do that. But ultimately, a lot of companies will look to announce this within major news as well, to notify their network and obviously ultimately notify their potential customers that are moving out into that region. So even things like setting up Google News alerts, you'll quite often look around that. So again, you can run specific searches based on perhaps or keywords in terms of the industry. So let's, for argument's sake, say fintech, and then within that search, look for new office as well, or new headquarters. Run some Boolean searches and save those to ensure that you're kept up to date.
Okay, brilliant. So the next one down on the list for us to cover is a new office.
Yeah, so I think we touched on this a fair bit actually, just within the last one. So it's very slightly different to headquarters. Obviously, I say headquarters really is going to be a hub. You're looking at large volumes of staff that are going to be in there and completely setting that foundation up. A new office may actually be just a single department of that organization that's opening elsewhere. So sales is probably a great example of that. Whereas if you've got a centralized region in terms of your headquarters, but you want to open up a new office to provide more localized reach within another region, or could be state, could even be a country as well. But you may choose to just set up a sales function within that office. This is a great example, obviously, from that side. Again, looking at those different tools, are they fit for purpose in terms of what they're currently using to servicing that other area? So that's probably one thing to really look at within that. But again, even more so from an upsell perspective, if you're selling into sales or marketing professionals, and those are the types of people that they're putting into this new office, then there's the obvious opportunity in terms of upselling the number of licenses perhaps that you've already provided to that organization. So it's not going to be quite as impactful as a new headquarters, but there's certainly some opportunity and something to track more so from potential growth opportunity within that current client.
Brilliant. And I think the next one that we were going to talk about is a new branch, which I guess is very, very similar to a new office, but it's generally associated more with financial and legal organizations, right?
Exactly that. So, again, very, very similar to the office piece, but a branch, anything from more of a financial services kind of institution. You've probably heard a lot of it surrounding like banks and everything in that perspective. But what they will typically, and a good opportunity within this, is certainly around the regulatory and compliance side of it. If those are the types of solutions that you're selling, again, even if you're already in the States and you're opening up within a different state, there is a lot of variables between the different states in the US when it starts to come down to the likes of tax laws in terms of employee benefits, everything else within that. That's really where we're going to start to look at that. So again, from a sales perspective opportunity, it's probably more so getting into the weeds a little bit with that to understand, how does that differ compared to their other locations? Is your product going to be able to service perhaps a need or a pain point that they have when looking to open that new branch?
Okay, and then we're going to go into a bit more of a, I guess, niche for those, I would say probably larger companies. And then the next one is Center of Excellence. And I'm in my head, I've got, I don't know why, but I've got Gymshark. I think in the last couple of years, they opened a new sort of central head office in Birmingham, I think it is. But as part of that, they actually opened almost like a center of excellence to focus on actually building out their own fabrics and materials rather than relying on suppliers. So let's talk about center of excellence.
Yeah, so these will generally come with a lot of your bigger brands. So a lot of your bigger organizations that have scaled successfully, they've obviously, they've got successful operations with a consistent revenue, obviously incoming in the background. But what they will look to do within these center of excellence is, as you said, is to open up a centralized location where they can basically look in terms of perfecting, but improving a lot more of their processes, their procedures, perhaps their route to market. But it's around then creating more of a central hub, which probably surrounds a lot more of your senior leadership, truth be told, because they're the people that ultimately are going to be driving through those decisions in terms of what's the best way they can efficiently improve their operations, perhaps improve their outbound sales processes. It will be looking at that, but basically bringing a lot of the senior heads together to really dig into the metrics, the data, and everything else in the background to ensure that the steps being taken are the right ones moving forward.
So that's more, I guess, operationally we're talking. Like you said, it's more process and operations rather than product.
Yeah, exactly that. But what it does really open up, again, if you've got an existing relationship with that organization already, from sales perspective, there's a great opportunity for referrals there as well, because, if we can start targeting or getting in with those specific types of new offices, in that center of excellence, it will be a great route directly into the senior leadership within that organization. And ultimately, again, depending on what your product is, can it service one department of the business, or actually can it be get utilized across multiple departments? So there's a great opportunity there where, even if you can arrange kind of client visits and so forth, it's a great opportunity to really get in there and meet the other key stakeholders.
Okay, and then I'm looking at the next one down on my list, which was R&D and Tech Hub, and I think actually this is what I was talking about with Gymshark, where they invested in their R&D at their in Birmingham. So do you want to just cover R&D and Tech Hubs?
Yeah, so R&D, research and development, is a major part to any organization. This will really look around, again, it will be digging deeply into the data side of things, but also the costings aspect as well. So, throughout any organization, doesn't matter, what you're really doing, but what you'll find is a lot of this mainly will be across tech businesses. So that might be like really, really high tech, such as like, semiconductors, for argument's sake, or it may actually, break down into more like software development businesses. But ultimately what they're starting to do here is to find more efficient ways in terms of how can they improve their products, their services. Actually, are there certain aspects of their product that perhaps they can take out to service different areas or even create new products within that? It literally is more of a play about and a discovery to a degree in terms of, how else can they make that business more profitable? There's a lot of work as well that goes in from a government perspective in terms of R&D, and there's a lot of kind of tax credits available for organizations like this, which ultimately will actually feed back into the funding episode that we did of this as well. So what we'll often see is businesses opening up new R&D centres to look at that research and development and ultimately look at how they can make their business more profitable or open up new solutions. But a lot of that will be supported as well through additional funding that will come back in from outside, I say like governments, for example, in terms of basically, I suppose, adding into the research that's going on throughout the country to produce new products, produce new businesses, and ultimately develop that technology further. So it's a great indicator if somebody is opening an R&D office, not so much necessarily right now around the opportunity, but it's a key indicator in terms of, okay, what's coming next. So it's a great indicator of like future growth. So it's one to definitely stay very, very close to, because ultimately, whether that's within a 6-month period, 12 months, 24 months, it's very, very likely that business is going to be releasing new solutions, new products, and ultimately off the back of that, they're going to be setting up new departments as well. So it's a great opportunity, again, from sales perspective, to stay very close to that. I track it. I track actually, how's the headcount growing within that specific hub. Is that something that's accelerating? And again, that's probably due or signs that they have found something that they're looking to accelerate further. And what will come off the back of that are more sales opportunities. And I say whether that's new products that you can sell into them when they're setting up, or perhaps it's expanding the licenses or agreements that you have in place already, where they're starting to set up new departments. Ultimately, it could lead to them opening new headquarters, other offices, other branches as well. It's dependent on what it is that they're going to be developing or researching within that hub.
And I'm trying to think of a couple of examples. Also, I'll use the Gymshark one first, which is, I think they actually did a whole video series of them showing the R&D, and they spent millions on these machines that basically were designed to create a new weave of stretch material for their leggings. So one, I guess, if you're selling machines, great. If you're selling computers, if you're selling material, I guess, if think of it from recruitment as well. If you're, you've got people who are specialists, fabric makers, I don't know, hypothetically, that's a great example. And then the other one I can think of is Tesla, when Tesla say, right, we're going to invest pretty much all of our time and money in hydrogen engines moving forward, because electric is the short-term future, but hydrogen's long-term, right? So you can predict that's sort of where that company's going to be going.
Yeah, a good example as well, and this is from a UK government perspective, but there's one actually very, very close to home. So the UK government set up a scheme a couple of years ago, which was called the Catapult. And they basically created these R&D hubs within basically like a centralized hub between a group of commercial businesses. So ultimately, they were in there to help grow the technology. So for argument's sake, there's one looking at, well, the one closest to home is actually looking at semiconductors. So the government opened this R&D hub where they then worked with all the semiconductor commercial businesses within the area to ultimately try and provide a hub to enhance that technology and get Wales on a international scale in terms of right up there within semiconductor manufacturing. And ultimately with that, there's been a lot of businesses that are very local to that hub that have, as a result, have been able to produce more advanced technology, new products, and so forth from that. So that's kind of a great example, although that's a government-run scheme, but that's what people will be doing, I say, to help speed up that process to market, enhance their products, and ultimately, as they make things more efficient and give them better market fit.
And I think, speaking of Welsh semiconductor manufacturers, I think they were a couple of companies, or at least one company was sat on our table at the Wales Tech Awards, weren't they, that produced semiconductors? Yeah, small world. But okay, so the last one on our list is data centers.
So the world of data. I think, everybody's probably aware of this, the world marketing, sales, organizations, everything is run by data these days, and that's the way it should be. It makes people, it gives them the ability to make more informed decisions as they move through the market. And again, that's even starting to look at, okay, where's the best market fit for their product? How does that then service the industry? Where's the biggest industry growth? But what businesses will be doing as well is obviously delving very, very deeply into the data they have. And that can be anything. That can be really in terms of, the users of their, let's say, tech products. How are they utilizing it? Which way is the product being used in the way that it was designed to be used? There's a lot of different things that they can really delve into here to dig that out. So what companies will often do is, again, develop those kind of data centers where they can really create hubs to really delve into that, but have all your heads of engineerings within that, all your software developers, all your perhaps your UI UX teams, maybe data scientists, etc. That is going to be their role in terms of really starting to understand how that product can service their customers better. Now, moving into probably 2023, it's a very hot topic right now in terms of product-led growth. Some of the most successful kind of unicorns out there at the moment have all taken that approach into more of working towards a more PLG motion. A lot of these organizations will have basically set up these data centers, and it's to really delve into that so that actually they can start to define their market fit even better than what it currently is. But what that then means post that is, with that further kind of research or drilling into the data, those products or services that they have are going to be further enhanced, which ultimately, once they start to understand that market fit, that customer fit, is going to then lead into more growth of that business and more sales. So off the back end of this kind of research or data dive, what you will then start to see is an increase in revenues and ultimately an increase in headcount. And again, that then may lead into opening up further headquarters, further offices, and everything else in between. So again, similar to an R&D hub, it's kind of an early indicator that they're starting to, I suppose, invest more within their current processes to ultimately lead to further revenue further down the line.
And data and tech is one of the fastest moving industries in terms of, there's no, I guess, sight of it slowing down in terms of, digital banking, e-commerce, that sort of stuff. There's going to be basically a constant need for data centers, essentially. Exactly
that. Everything, as I said, it is run by data, and it's all about, how fast can you get from A to B, and whatever that may be. We've probably seen it. The easiest way to do that is, how quickly is it for me to transfer you money? Before it was popping down to the bank, you having to queue up, meet somebody, transfer that payment. Now you can just obviously open your banking app, send that money literally within seconds. That's how the world's transformed in the last, probably realistically, the last 10, 11 years. That's only going to accelerate further. But I say, in terms of the data that we're now inputting into things, even when you start to look at like cookie tracking, for example, online, everything like that, it means that, companies are able to get out more informed marketing and become very, very targeted in their approach. Again, that's only going to accelerate, but with that, that's what really helps drive and increase those revenues of an organization as well.
Okay, brilliant. So we've covered new office, headquarters, offices and branches, centres of excellence, R&D tech hubs, and data centres. So of those, across those 6, I think we touched on it briefly, but the key areas for tracking those particular triggers specifically would be company's house, company websites, PR releases, that sort of stuff, major news updates from each of these companies, right?
Yeah, exactly that. It's not going to be kind of in one centralized place, annoyingly. That you need to have something that really does really scale this out and cover a very, very broad aspect in terms of news generation and everything else. But I say it's about understanding as well with these opportunities what they can present at what time. The R&D and data centers, you're talking a much kind of longer game with these, but they're a key indicator of that there will be growth at some point. Whereas when you can start to see new headquarters, office, branches, or center of excellences being opened, then that's more of your immediate, time to go out and get hunting.
And you sort of touched on it there, that you want to be scaling this out, and it's almost like, well, why would you invest all this time or resource into doing this? And the reason for that is when you reach out to a buyer or a prospect off the back of one of these triggers, there's a much higher chance in the realms of 3 to 5% increase in those outbound success rates because you're reaching out with relevance.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if I really gave you a call and I knew absolutely nothing, the chances of you wanting to actually have a conversation with me are pretty slim. But actually, if I'm going in there and I'm informed in terms of what's happening within that business, and suddenly being able to have a strategic conversation in terms of, okay, look, you're opening new headquarters, how is that going to impact the current process? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that in terms of where your product can help? Suddenly you're starting to provide much more of a consultative approach rather than a spray and pray.
I think obviously we'll wrap things up there, but if you want to find out more about sales triggers, including the 116 that we do track here at Selligence, then just search what are sales triggers on Google and we're on the first page, or just go on our website and it's the featured blog. And you can read about each of the 116 there. But tune in next week. We'll be covering, I think, maybe 3 or 4 different categories rather than deep diving on just one. So make sure you tune in for that. But thanks again for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Happy hunting.